This is the Horse Radio Network.
Greetings, horse people. Coach Jen here, and thanks for tuning in to Horse Tip Daily, episode 1319, brought to you today by Purina Mills. Heidi-ho, everybody. Dr. Brian Waldridge will be sitting down with me today to explain core vaccines. And we're going to get right to it after this from Purina Mills. Do you know how to tell if your horse is a senior? If you guessed age, you'd be wrong, because not all horses age at the same rate. So how do you tell if your horse has entered their golden years? Well, you might notice gray or white hair around the eyes and muzzle, weight loss, low energy, a decline in mental condition, or a choppier gait due to aches and pains. If any of these describe your horse, he or she might be a senior, and it might be a good time to start him or her on Purina Equine Senior or Equine Senior Active Horse Feed. They both have Active Edge, a proprietary prebiotic, proven through years of research to support a senior horse's aging immune system. With Purina Equine Senior, greatness never ages. To learn more, visit purinamills.com/activeage. And I'm so happy to welcome back to the show Dr. Brian Waldridge, known to most of the horse world as Dr. B of Dr. B's Bluegrass, who has a fantastic Facebook page that highlights in beautiful living color all the wonderful things that are to be seen in Lexington, Kentucky. And he's a veterinarian too. So welcome back to the show, Dr. B.
Oh, thank you. It's always just the biggest pleasure to be able to be invited. So thank you for asking me.
Are you a Kentucky native, Dr. B?
I am. I actually grew up in Bardstown, Kentucky. And that's where, when you listen to my old Kentucky home, that's an old plantation house about 2 miles from where I grew up. So I grew up in the town where my old Kentucky home is.
Oh my gosh, isn't that cool?
Oh, it is. And it's probably more bourbon made there than anywhere else in the world too. So there's lots of very cool Kentucky things there, and it's about 60 miles west of Louisville, 60 miles west of Lexington, 40 miles south of Louisville. So kind of right in the middle of the state.
Right in the middle of one of the most beautiful states in the country, if I may say so.
Well, thank you. I'm very prejudiced about it, but I'm also would have to agree.
There we go. Well, we're going to talk about a veterinary topic today, since you are Dr. B. And this comes around with amazing regularity. We have to give our horses their vaccinations. And I don't know about anybody else, but at the beginning of the year is when I think about it, because I have to kind of schedule things out. And, okay, I'm going to go here or there at a certain time during the year, and I need to make sure vaccines happen on the right kind of a schedule. And the ones that we're going to talk about today are called core vaccines. So tell me what a core vaccine and why they're considered core.
So core vaccine, the way that I describe that to everybody is those are the vaccines that are recommended for every horse in every situation here in the United States. So the core, if you think about that, that's their essential vaccine, and that's where vaccination starts. And then from there, you branch out to what's an at-risk disease in your area. So with the core vaccines, there's 5 of them. The first one's tetanus, which everybody knows that one. And then our sleeping sicknesses. And depending on which side of the Mississippi River you're on, we have eastern equine encephalomyelitis here in the eastern part of the United States, and western equine encephalomyelitis on the western states, west of the Mississippi River, which is a mosquito-borne vaccine. And then with West Nile being now pretty much in every state in the continental United States, West Nile, another mosquito-borne vaccine, is in there. So that's our 5, unless I forgot one: tetanus, EEE, and WEE for those western or eastern equine encephalomyelitis, West Nile, and rabies.
See, I never realized that the Eastern and Western had to do with the geography of the United States. I always thought it was a strain from some exotic country somewhere that got brought in accidentally 15 generations ago, and I didn't know that. Really?
Yeah, so California is kind of an exotic location to me, but it is. So, and there are big differences in the diseases themselves. EEE, the Eastern, is almost uniformly fatal, and very few horses have survived. And the horses that have survived it tend to have permanent neurologic issues, where the Western form has a lower mortality rate, and so tends to be milder. So both in geography and the clinical signs are the same, but the survivability of the two diseases is significantly different.
So when somebody says, okay, they call their vet up and they say, I need to get core vaccines for my horse, or they go and purchase them to do the vaccines themselves, you frequently see Eastern and Western encephalitis together in the same vaccine. And that's okay to do even though you're in Mississippi and you're never going to leave Mississippi, or you're in New York State and you're never going to leave New York State. It's just fine to have your horse vaccinated against both.
Yes, and it's recommended as part of the core, because one thing that we've found, and one of the other many benefits of global warming, is mosquitoes go everywhere and carry things everywhere. West Nile wasn't in this country until the 1990s, and so because of the mosquitoes are found in more parts of the country than maybe where they weren't there before, and they persist longer, you can't be assured that you're not going to have Western crossover or Eastern crossover, or so when West Nile came, it's believed that mosquitoes on a ship from somewhere are what brought that into the country.
Well, I guess that's the tricky part with as much travel as there is, both human and products moving across the country, horses moving across the country. Insects that can carry these diseases can get trapped literally anywhere. And before you know it, you've got a disease that has only occurred on one coast across the country on another. So that kind of makes sense. So that makes sense. So when the AAEP created guidelines for core vaccines, what are some of the things they took into consideration? Is it whether or not a human can get it, whether or not it's fatal to the horse, whether or not it's got an effective vaccine available? How do they make those decisions?
Well, the biggest one is what would hit all horses in all situations. So
universality. Okay.
Yeah, so I tell people it's the building block. Every vaccine program starts with these the 5 core, and then you branch out from there to decide what other vaccines you may need to use, depending on what part of the country you're in, or if it's a show horse, what the risks may be because they're at increased exposure to other horses.
So we're looking at diseases that any horse under any living conditions could get anywhere in the country, because rabies, you can get that anywhere. Tetanus, that's in the soil, can get that anywhere. West Nile virus, as you say, has more recently become a core vaccine compared to some of the others, because we're seeing it across the country, and any horse can get it because it's insects and they go everywhere, as is encephalitis. Right. Very interesting. Now, once you get beyond those core vaccines, you usually have a discussion with your healthcare practitioner about what risk-based vaccines your horse should have. Explain what a risk-based vaccine means. What criterion are being used?
So that would be pertaining to your situation of what part of the country you're in. If there's the best example would be botulism. We see botulism here in Kentucky, and then Florida that can see it as well. So if you're in an area where botulism occurs, then adding botulism into your vaccine program would be an added risk to the horses. And so it would be worthwhile to vaccinate for that, because it's common enough. And when it does occur, it's expensive to treat. So if we can avoid the horse contracting botulism, that's sure one I would recommend. Other ones would be there's a new leptospirosis vaccine, which is a bacteria that can cause abortion, and that's starting to be used here in Kentucky because we do see lepto abortions are one of the most common causes of abortion here. Or if you had a horse that, say, went to a lot of horse shows and things like that, and you're in a boarding barn, and that's where you think about things like adding in vaccination for strangles and flu and things like that, because those would be communicable diseases, and horses that travel and horses that are under stress would be more likely to bring those back.
So these are diseases that your horse might qualify for one or the other, depending upon what type of living situation he's got, whether or not it's a barn where he's exposed to lots of horses coming in and out and lots of stress.
Right. It really is how much there's something going to come in, or they may spread.
And then how much traveling is doing, where he's going to be the one traveling in and exposing others, because we have to look at both sides. He could bring something in as the one who has been exposed, or be exposed too, because I think a lot of people look at it as, well, I'm going to not vaccinate for X, Y, or Z communicable, and that's a disease a horse can transfer directly from horse to horse and doesn't need anybody in between, because I'm very careful and my horse doesn't travel very much. He's not going to get anything and carry it to anyone. But I think the flip side of that we often forget about is that your horse could pick something up and give it to someone, and he could be exposed to something and bring it home. So it's both sides. You don't want your horse to get it from somebody else, but you also don't want your horse to unknowingly pick it up, yes, smaller chance, and give it to everybody else in the barn. So when you're looking at your vaccines, some boarding facilities require everyone to be on the same vaccination schedule. Others do your own thing. Does it make more sense from the public health perspective to have a relatively closed population, say a boarding barn where the horses pretty much live there year round and go out to horse shows occasionally and on weekends and come right back? Would it make more sense for those animals all to be on the same schedule?
It does for me, because, as you say, herd immunity is important, and the concept of herd immunity is basically all those animals in that group have good immunity against, we'll say, flu, and so it's less likely that if flu gets in there, that it's less likely that those horses will become sick. And also the other thing you're hoping to be, if horses do get sick, that they're less likely to shed flu virus, or they'll shed flu virus in a lower amount because they've been previously vaccinated. So you're right. It both helps to prevent something getting in there and getting started. But if somebody does get sick, you're hoping that what they share with the others will be in lesser amounts.
So there we go. And the final the final question I have for our discussion on core vaccines, Coggins test. What is it, and why is it important?
So a Coggins test, that's named after Dr. Leroy Coggins, who developed the test against equine infectious anemia, and that's a virus. And it's in the same family as the AIDS virus. And what this virus does is it gets into the horse, and when a horse is exposed, they'll usually run a fever, become anemic because the virus affects the red cells, also affects red cell production, and can cause death. And the platelet count will usually drop as well, and their legs will swell. But what that virus does is it'll then, if the horse survives, which most of them do, it inserts itself into their DNA, which is how viruses replicate themselves. And it'll sit there, and it may sit there forever, but at some point the horse will get stressed or the virus mutates. I think that virus does is it mutates, and when it pops back up and mutates, it's like the horse has never seen that virus before. And so that viral load will build up into the horse, and that's where it can be spread to other horses. And it's spread by biting insects, and it has to be large biting insects, so because they have to be able to physically carry enough blood to infect another horse. So the insects that do that are horse flies or deer flies, which are in the same family. Or I think everybody knows about if you use a needle from one horse to go to another horse, that blood transfer, things like surgical instruments or teeth floats and things like that aren't disinfected can also be potential carriers. So the bad thing about EIA virus is there's no cure for it, and infection is forever. So any horse that's infected is usually going to be an asymptomatic carrier. The horse shows no overt signs, but when that virus mutates or if you get stressed potentially, then that horse can begin to shed the virus and infect other horses. So that's why it's so important. We don't have a cure for it. We don't have a vaccine for it. And most horses that have it, you can't tell they have it, but they're always a danger to infect other horses. And, I've had that happen to me twice in my career where EIA virus has popped up, once in a horse showing clinical signs that were unusual. A horse came in for neurologic disease. But in another case, folks had bought this pony and were bringing it home, brought it by the clinic to get a Coggins test before they brought it home, and it was an asymptomatic carrier.
Oh, wow. That must have been devastating.
Oh, it is, because you have to go back. And once that happens, you have to start going back where the horse came from and trace back to the herd. And then and that's a state veterinarian thing. And when they did that, they found another asymptomatic carrier there at the farm. So it's going to be a quarantine situation, and those horses, they can't be in the population anymore. So they have to go to a research facility or they have to be put down.
Wow. So EIA, which is what a Coggins test tests for, the Coggins test tests to see if your horse is carrying the virus. There is no such thing as a vaccine, so the only way to know if that stuff is around is to get the Coggins test, and you're doing it so that you can take asymptomatic horses out of the general population because they're the ones that are spreading it around.
Right, because our only control that we have against that virus is to identify infected horses and take them out of the population. That's right. That's the only control we have.
Well, there we go. So if you want to learn more about core vaccines, risk-based vaccines, and Coggins tests, you can find lots of really good information at the website of the American Association of Equine Practitioners. That's AAEP.org. And they actually have a section just for lay people. So stuff is written in words that we understand. And I will put a link on today's show notes page. And you can follow that and head on over there and learn more about it. And thank you very much, Dr. Brian Waldridge. Where can people follow you on Facebook?
They can find me at Dr. B's Bluegrass on Facebook. And I always appreciate it when you put me on the show and I get to see new folks are logging on and starting to like my page, hopefully. So everything's on there.
Well, there you have it. Make sure to have all of your Horse Radio Network shows with you wherever you go by downloading the free Horse Radio Network app for your iPhone or your Android. Just go to your app store and search Horse Radio Network. It's quick, it's free, and it's easy. You can also subscribe via iTunes or your favorite podcatcher. And thanks again to Purina Mills for sponsoring this show. You can learn more about Purina Mills Equine Senior Horse Feeds by going to purinamills.com/activeage. This is Coach Jen, and I will be back again soon with another tip. So until then, go ride your horse. The Horse Radio Network and the Horse Radio Network hosts are not responsible for statements made by guests on the Horse Tip Daily. Please use your own judgment when listening to the tips on this show.